The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Okay, guys, let me get some more stuff set up here. All right, does everybody hear me? Is the sound okay? Got a good connection? You can see my screen with Race Manager rules discussion and BMX Racing League update. Should be kind of a questions thing. Can't see your screen? Okay, let's see. Show main screen. How about that? Perfect, okay. And by the way, Renee, I just saw, I was looking at some of the Facebook comments while I was jumping on district points at nationals, Gold Cups. Talked about that. Talked about, I don't know that you'll ever go to, we have a kind of a basic fundamental principle of every race offers district points. Some offer additional series points, but I certainly last year was kind of lobbying for nationals to go down to single district points. I just couldn't get it done. So if more of you kind of feel that same way, that hey, maybe that'll help put the focus on district number one back on district and not the national riders, and they got to do their 10 races or actually 20 races now, because we dropped that from 10% for 10 races to 5% for 20. So we're trying to slowly help that problem, but I certainly went for kind of a radical going from triple district down to single, but just didn't get it done. All right, so it's 5:01. I'll wait a couple more minutes just to let some more people. I know how many people registered for this thing, and I usually like to wait until most of them are in here and see if they have any feedback for the first couple of slides. So give me like 2 minutes and we'll come back and we'll get this thing going. Well, people aren't jumping on in droves like I thought they would, so we'll wait a couple more minutes. Display audio perfect. Okay, so we're good there. You know what? Let me go get my other headphones so I don't get some weird audio feedback. Okay, there we go. That's better. So we've got a bunch of us in here. I'd certainly appreciate everybody logging in on time. We'll kind of get this thing going. And let me make sure it's recording. It is recording. Perfect. Okay. And there comes some more people logging in. Well, again, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Race Manager program that was released for the state final tracks. That's going to be the first couple of slides. Rules discussion. I've got some slides. If there's anything that you guys think should be considered for rule changes next year, certainly type them in as questions/comments. I'll try to read through those. As always, give you my opinion, which certainly sometimes doesn't mirror that of the rest of the staff. And as I was just saying about district points at nationals, who's speaking? I'm sorry, Brad Hallen, senior track director. Yeah, so probably be me and Donnie Robinson logging on. Donnie Robinson logging on later to kind of talk about BMX Racing League. So last time it was about 6:30 by the time we got to the BMX Racing League stuff after the rules discussion. But as I said, if you have an idea for a rule change or modification, a lot of stuff going back and forth on the TO Facebook about this expert female, expert girl, and what that entails, if it's a label change, if it should be more than a label change, and yada, yada, yada. So certainly your comments, questions are all welcome. Please type them in. The great thing about doing these webinars is that any question or comment that you type in, GoToWebinar saves it, and I can download all those questions and then share them with the rest of the staff so we can kind of see how that discussion went. You obviously don't get the audio, but if they wanted to get that, they can go watch the playback of it as well. So anyways, we'll get this thing going and we'll get it wrapped up, and I can pack and get ready for my flight tomorrow. All right, so let me make sure I didn't go too far. I think I might have hit, nope, I did. So the Torf Wizard. The Torf Wizard was kind of a big change that we did to the program. We did this early at the beginning of the year, kind of announced this thing. But one of the things that we did with the tracks hosting the state finals was released a version of the program, version 3.0.17.1. And that point 1 kind of takes the Torf Wizard from being something that just prepares a PDF file for you to upload via ShareFile via that Torf uploader into something where for your state final race or your provincial final race only, you upload this package. And it's a package that the programmer calls the TORP, T-O-R-P package. So, of course, the resources and tutorials, that'll go through all of what the Torf Wizard does and everything. The guys did a great video for that. So some things about the Torf Wizard when you use that, obviously you must set up the race properly to ensure correct pricing. If, for example, you're going to run your, if you set up your Olympic day as a regular district race, then it's going to charge you those regular district race fees, and the same is true with Race for Lives or some of those where the people coming out and doing a one day, you're not charged the dollar. So making sure the race is set up properly is pretty important. You got to score the race in order to unlock that Torf Wizard functionality. You must give a name of the head official. And then, of course, after that, you're going to list any injuries with the pertinent info, explanation of the injury, what part of the track it happened at, that sort of thing. And it gives you the opportunity to make manual adjustments to the Torf total. So anybody that's used Race Manager knows that you're going to run into those weird situations where maybe a kid comes over from another track and he knows his serial number from the other track, and you believe he's bought the membership, but he didn't have his receipt, so you don't know the validation code. So you're going to hit add new and burn a number. It's never recommended, but tracks do it all the time. Or they, you hit the wrong button in saying, instead of add existing, you say add new, and now it's charged $60 and you need to back that $60 out, or whatever the case may be. Gives you the opportunity to make those manual adjustments to the Torf total and then explain what those adjustments are for the accounting team. Of course, you digitally certify the Torf, which locks it and serves as your electronic signature, just like signing the bottom of your Torf. What's next? Well, I kind of talked about that a little bit, and it's here, sort of. It's here for tracks hosting the state finals, provincial finals, as I said. Or there's some tracks that have been given beta versions of this. So And we're currently exporting the TORF data and race data into XML files. Again, packaging them into something called a TORF. Auto-processing the TORF via the website with payment via credit card on file is the next step in the TORP system. And yes, I said TORP. So again, track operator reporting package, because we're basically packaging up everything that's involved with your race. I'm talking the race finishes, the membership data that you've collected. Just all of that stuff gets put into this thing that gets a .torp extension, and then it gets pushed up into the cloud. And of course, we're working on the software is going to go up to the cloud, snatch that, pull it back down from the cloud, and import it into the membership system. So the entire race and membership data exported to ultimately download into the membership system. Faster turnaround for points. And again, we're testing now with this state championship finals, but we've got a problem. And that problem is we're only expecting, and this wasn't really explained real well if you're a track that was hosting the state finals, that the state final is the only race we want you guys pushing up this way. We don't want you the next week when you run a single pointer to push up your stuff this way, because right now, this is what these folders look like when your stuff gets pushed up to the cloud. So it's storing it by year. And then right here is the track number. And again, most of these tracks are tracks that hosted the state final in their state. So there's, Lincoln Park BMX, Cobb County. I see Malala there, Langley. That's North Dakota, Rum River, Whip City, Dacono. You see all these tracks. There's Yukon. So you see all these tracks, and that's what's happening. Well, for tracks that were continuing to upload those single point races, they're being uploaded to those folders, and nobody knows to go in there and get them. And the only way to really go get them is to expand these and look for new files. In each of these folders, you'd have to expand it and look for new files until the programmer gets this process done to where it will automatically go up and scan all these folders looking for ones whose date has changed since the last time it pulled it down. So again, if you have version 3.0.17.1 of Race Manager for beta testing, or because you hosted a final, please do not upload any other races except the final via the new uploader. All right. Let's see if we add. Yeah, and the problem with deleting incorrect memberships is just that purging of those memberships kind of happens once a year, and it happens whenever we kind of shut down for 2 weeks. We give you a new version of the database for the next year's rule changes. You pull that blank version down, and then what it does is it copies out your old DB, and it pulls in anyone that exists in the old DB and the new DB, and which removes those bad records. What I always tell people about those bad records, the best thing you can do to make sure that you don't accidentally grab the wrong guy, is to name the names like first and last name all Z's or something. So if you do a name search, there's no possibility of you grabbing, the wrong guy. And again, I mean, I'll get to, kind of, I think later on, if I remember a slide, but, as I've mentioned before, we're looking into, memberships being you're purchasing them online only. I just had a very long meeting today at 2:30 with the web developers who've kind of developed the process and flow of somebody buying a brand new membership. So, and that's something they actually did kind of a nice little, picture chart of here's how we foresee somebody going through the guest checkout process of getting memberships that I may put up for you guys to look at and get your feedback. Again, the more eyes that can look at it, the better, to make it the best we can for the customers. All right, so rule changes. I've got a couple listed here that we'll talk about. Again, any other ones that you want to talk about are fair game, just launch them at me. The first thing I talked about this, I want to say in a May webinar, but I just kind of want to go back to what is total points, how to score total points, what to do in the classes more than 8 riders. And this is just something to where, you know, one of the tracks, well, several of the tracks that have this problem of having a single class that has more than one group, and yet they run the whole race as total points, has said, hey, let's just, when it's more than 8 riders, it just automatically becomes a transfer. So that, you know, your whole race might be total points, but for this class, and quite honestly, it usually happens with 5 and under novice. But for this class, it would say, if it's a 2 moto transfer, 2 combined 4 to main, right? Where the rest of the class, if they're only one group, would just, they'd race total points 3 times, you'd add up the points, and there's your overall finishes. So I certainly think that's a great solution. And again, I mean, you know, as many of you know, if this happens, a 9-rider class happens at a UCI race, you know, what they would do is take 4, take 3, and run a 7-rider main event. So, you know, we're just looking at, you know, how do we make this easier when you have more than one group and you've told the system you want it to run total points for the whole race. And I think the easiest solution is just to turn those classes that are more than one group into a transfer round. So again, and if I'm going through any of these, you know, rule changes and you like it, agree to it, all the comments and questions get saved. So certainly let us know or send us an email saying, hey, I really like that. I think that's a good idea. It just helps us to know when we get in there and have our meeting with the staff, how you guys, you know, what you guys are thinking about some of these ideas. Older girl experts and moto building. How does total point to main work differently to a 2 combined 4 to a main? You know, to be honest, I never run total points, you know, except for 3-rider classes, obviously, because I'm only doing national events. I'd have to ask a track that runs total points, and hopefully there's one logged in here who could tell me what it'll do. I can tell you what it does for, you know, if you've got 10 riders or whatever, what it's going to do with 10 riders, because you got 2 groups of 5, is it's going to pull the low 4 based on points into an 8-rider main, and they run 1 time for the money or trophy, as it were, based on that. The question is the 9-rider and whether it, I think what our system does now, and again, if you're a track that knows the answer to this, I don't want to take the time right now to set up a race. Yeah, and here's some of the BC tracks logging in that do run classes with like this. They say we run the larger groups as a transfer race, despite the fact that it says total points. So they're just basically, you know, overriding the system right now to get it to do what I'm talking about getting it done. So anyways, older expert girls in moto building. So one of the things, and this was kind of, you know, I always have a really slow beginning of the season in terms of going to races. I you know, haven't gone to the Vegas January race in a while. And my first race this year was that I went to was Oregon, not until April. And so I was made aware of this problem with the oldest expert girl riders of the day, trying to check down to find a legal class. And so what the problem is when the rule book talks about order of operations in moto building, there's like a step 2 and a step 6. I should have brought my rule book home. I'm doing this webinar from home so I can get ready to fly in the morning. But anyways, step 2 is like, you know, the girls do this, and then the intermediates check here. And then like you get to step 6 and it's like, now the girl can check back to try to find a legal class. Well, the problem is that along the way, either step 2 or step 3 is going to put them into an intermediate male class of their age, or you know, and then the rules regarding how those intermediate classes move, and if their class doesn't make, then they move up to expert. It's just written in such a way, and the program was written to basically follow letter of the law in the rule book, to where those oldest girl riders of the day never get the opportunity to check down as Rule 6 suggests. So I've certainly, made a promise to some of those older female riders that are racing 20-inch that this will be buttoned up. I mean, Cody and I did, told them that, so that's going to be fixed. And then you saw the use of the word expert girl. Again, there's a big thing on the TO Facebook thing about expert girl. Currently, the wording of the rulebook is such. Okay, so that's talking about that. And yeah, here we go. Notice the wording on expert girls. This is a label change, nothing more, nothing less. My opinion, as you can read on that TO Facebook group, is that this is and should be just a label change. And, again, I think the debate about if the expert girls class doesn't make, should the fact that you're using the word expert in the label of their class mean that if their class doesn't make, then they go to expert boys? Well, I understand the argument when you're just looking at the label, but I think to just look at the label and not the impact on the class, or whether the majority of expert girl riders would want this change is the key thing here. And and again, or for anybody who says, well, if girls get expert points, and girls, everybody knows, that the girls designation was really an expert female. Well, but they race in mixed open. Well, they're competitive in mixed open. And could some of them be competitive in the expert open? Absolutely, without question. But if we polled the majority of the expert girls' proficiency on whether they think they should race in the expert open or the mixed open, I think that by and large, most would say no. If our class doesn't make, we should race in intermediate boys, not expert boys. And number two, we should race in mixed open. I think the majority would say that. And again, one of my last posts was, hey, I think it'd be easy enough for me to task the web developers to say, I want a poll to where the only way you can log in is to log in with your serial number, because we know the serial numbers of the riders, we know their proficiency, and we know their gender, right? So if you log in and it sees your proficiency as girl, or maybe your proficiency is intermediate, but you're a female, I think if you're a female and you race 20-inch, then you maybe should get a vote in this, and you take a vote and you see what the majority of the public does. I don't, I can certainly speculate based on how long I've been in the sport, how long I've worked for the sanctioning body, but at the end of the day, I think it would be good to know what all the riders think. But that's my opinion on it. It's a label change, nothing more, nothing less. Nothing changes with respect to if they get put in an intermediate class, they get expert points, but the intermediates get intermediate points. That was a change many years ago, maybe 8-9 years ago. I'd have to go back and look through each of the rule books to find out exactly what year that changed. But that changed, and yeah, so that's the girl. Clips versus flats. So this is always, it comes up more and more. We get emails from people, and yeah, I mean, I saw the poll. I think Chris from Trumbull might have set up the poll that was on BMX Race Bikes, and it was pretty evenly split. And it was pretty evenly split between, and by a small margin, the majority were like, leave it alone, and certainly, my own kind of thing is, for the most part, it's tough to put the genie back in the bottle. And so there's that. And, and the other thing for everybody saying, look, it's best for people to learn on flats. And I think there are a lot of riders right now whose parents know this, their kids practice, and right now, so the only we've got two comments that have come through on the questions. One says experts only, The next says definitely leave it alone. So it's kind of that's most of what you get. And but really for the experts only, I think there are people that feel like it should be a certain age, over a certain age. Right now, that age is being talked about as, and I have to look, but it's either 12 and older should be allowed to run them, but 11 and under can't. But it's right around that age. UCI's age is not 13 for clips. They are talking about it, but it has not been done. It has not been done. The UCI's rule, the UCI is going to meet about that. Man, I mean, I want to say by this weekend, UCI will rule on what they're going to do. But I can tell you that I just flew back from Guatemala on Monday. And, there were riders, as young as 5, 6 that were clipped in down there. And that, so these other countries right now are running it just like we're running it, and actually I would think for them, they're not banning their novices from doing it. But Renee, to your point, yes, UCI is certainly considering implementing a rule that has a certain age for clips. One of the things that, let me get to some of my points here because I'm gonna talk about them and then I'm gonna bring these up. But I'm not sure the source of the debate this year. Currently, we've got a track running flats only for all but the series level races. Of course, I'm talking about Ted Bailey down at Rebel BMX. And, Ted runs a great program. He's running good numbers down there. I mean, I certainly, my racing career was done on flats. I mean, that was back in the 70s, 80s for the most part. When I came back in the 90s while my middle brother was racing, I raced mostly on flats. And as clips started to come in, I did practice on them. I don't know that I ever competed in clips. But by that point, I was racing mountain bikes. I was very comfortable on my time pedals. And I, so I certainly hit the BMX track on clips. And, it is what it is. So, again, keep leaving your feedback on the Track Operator Facebook post. It's good stuff to bring into rules meeting to know what our tracks think, or comment right here, put in the questions, put your comments, what you think. I download all this, share it with the staff, which is good stuff to bring into rules meetings. What will happen? Well, as a sanctioning body, we've got to weigh all the pros and the cons. For example, what will this do for our riders with respect to Worlds if other countries and UCI allow clips for all ages? So with the Worlds coming to Houston very, very soon, that's certainly a concern. Now, if UCI comes back and says, hey, 13 and over has to be 13 and over for clips, and 12 and under can't run them on the world stage, well, now there's a major concern of mine in terms of talking about all the pros and cons that goes right out the window, right? Because you can do what UCI did. So I think it would stop sandbagging. Well, maybe. I don't know. Sandbagging is a tough thing to stop. I mean, as long as there's awards being offered at those at the different skill levels, I think you're always going to have that. You're just always going to have that. And look, sandbagging occurs in every sport there is. I race cars right now, and there are people that race in my division that were drivers from a higher division. And there's a lot of guys that look at that and go, well, he's sandbagging. He's raced dirt late models or sprint cars, and what's he doing in our entry-level division? And I look at it and say, he's on the same equipment. He's in the same kind of car as me. We've got the same motor rules. Yes, he's a more accomplished driver, but that is what it is. So, I don't know that you ever stop sandbagging. Has there ever been a serious injury that was due? Well, I think there's serious injuries that are due to crashing, and to think that, there was never a bad injury when flats were around, that's absurd. Have there been serious injuries back in the day when nearly everybody was in open face helmets? Well, sure there was. And there's guys that still race open face helmets, right? And open face helmets with or without a JOFA, right? So I'm going to go to Washington this weekend, and I'm going to see my buddy Steve Clark, who runs an open face helmet with no JOFA whatsoever, just open face, like straight up, like I was doing back in the day. Um, what other questions do we got? How about if they need help in the gate 5 and under, shouldn't be able to use them? Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that kind of the whole, if they can't get clipped in the gate, but that's kind of a lot of times, to be honest, that's kind of solved by the starter, who's just going to, you know, if you're at a national and you're struggling to get clipped in on the gate, the starter is not going to slow down the pace of the race because you're trying to use equipment that you're not ready to use. So yeah. Uh, Age change would be tough for a kid on clips since he was 4 to 5 to change to flats. Absolutely, it would. Absolutely, it would. That would be a big difference because they're used to pulling up, on their pedal stroke. And when you've ridden on clips to hop onto something with flats, that's an entirely different way that you pedal. And of course, I say that the beauty of me having this and not having a live video is I'm sitting here in spandex because once I'm done with this, I'm going to get some laundry going, get my thing going. I'm going to hop on my Peloton on my clips and ride. So yeah, it's a way different pedal stroke, and I've been on clips for, I mean, since probably the early 90s on mountain bikes. And I can tell you that when I ride my Peloton bike, I'm constantly trying to refine my pedal stroke to be as efficient as possible. I see kids rush to intermediate to run clips. Maybe they would do the same to turn expert. Yeah, I think that. I know that sometimes we get these mountain bike guys that come over and they're used to clips. They want to race novice because they're brand new to BMX. And when I tell them, yeah, you can't use clips, they don't go out and put flats on. They turn intermediate. So yeah, I think you might see some people trying to jump up to into a class they're not ready for to be able to use the equipment that they're used to. If that age change thing happens. People putting their 5-year-old in the gate already clipped in. Yeah, I always hate to see that, or to see that little 5-year-old who's clipped in, who comes across the finish line and he's frantically looking for mom and dad to catch him so he doesn't fall over, right? I hate to see that too. If the rule needs to be made, why can't it be up to the track operator to make decisions based on the safety of riders at his or her track? Well, again, Chris, I mean, that's already done. I mean, again, you've got Rebel BMX that, for every non-series race that they run, they only allow flats. And that's what he wants to do at his track. And look, I've known Ted for, I mean, yeah, probably all the way back to 1990 when I started at ABA, and he's a great guy. Certainly believes in flat pedals. Believes that clips and clips happened in the 90s, and then there's things that came and went. Suspension, pro forks. I mean, different things like that come and go. But clips were one of those things that it was a mechanical advantage, and when people found out that it was kind of a mechanical advantage, the sport went that way. And it went that way, both in the US and on the world level. So, I mean, it is what it is. But look, Rebel BMX is already doing that. The only thing that we told them as a sanction is the first year that he did it, I said, look, you can't run a series race where we've got series points on the line. So I'm talking Gold Cup, I'm talking state championship series. You can't run those races where it's affecting riders that are trying to compete in a series if you don't let them use equipment that we deem legal. But for every other race that Ted runs, Ted says flats only. Do I think it'll see a huge decrease of local riders if the change is made? I have had several riders that said they would stop racing if they were forced to start riding flats again. A lot of money is spent on shoes and pedals. Uh, you know, no, I don't think it would be a huge decrease. I think the number of people that would say, you know what, if this rule is changed, then I'm gonna take my stick and ball and go home. No, I don't believe that at all. And I've seen that in other sports. In my current sport of auto racing, we've had rules in place to try to keep costs down in the divisions that I've raced in, and they've said, well, if you allow this, then I'm going to quit. And a couple years down the road, that's allowed, and all of a sudden, people are those same people who said they're going to quit are still racing. So no, I don't really think it would be a huge drop. Look, I mean, and what was funny was the people sometimes that were very pro flat, anti clip, would use the cost of clipless pedals and shoes as well. This is the big deterrent from people getting into the sport, or which is not true because novices can't run them, but they'd use that pedal cost of clips and clipless shoes. Look, flat pedals are going at the same price point right now as clip pedals are for the most part. I mean, they're $100. I don't care what kind of pedal you got. Now, shoes, yeah, the shoes, but look, a good pair of flat shoes for riding flats is probably going to set you back close to $100. And yeah, if you want that top of the line CD shoe, that's a $200-300 shoe. I get it. But, you can also find a nice stiff mountain biking shoe if you want a stiff shoe or whatever at a price point right around what a good flat shoe would be. So, I mean, yeah, if you've got a certain type of equipment now and you need to change it because the rule changes, yeah, that's going to turn some people off and this and that. But I think that the market will adjust to that and everybody will get used to it. Again, I've seen it in other sports and most recently in the auto racing that I do. With the understanding that you ride differently with clips compared to flats, doesn't it seem unfair that riders who've been in clips since they turned must now go back to flats? I mean, there would be a learning curve without a doubt, without a doubt, which again, I'm, as I said in my last webinar about a week ago, 6 days ago that I did before that flight to Guatemala, I said this, you never really see me post politics, about elections or anything. What I will say that kind of relates to politics and, this clip debate is in terms of rules and legislation and this and that, I'm kind of a less is more kind of guy. If we think that it's better for an intermediate rider to develop their bike handling skills on flats, then I think that tracks and coaches and parents should be taught that, and that should be drilled into their head that, you're going to be the best rider you can be by learning this way. And you don't necessarily need to, legislate it or make a rule to drive it. But again, I mean, my thoughts aren't always in sync with what the majority of the other staff at the sanction think. And again, because we're very tied in with the UCI, we run UCI races where, the United States is going to host a world championships. I think that the decision that UCI comes to in the next day or two is going to weigh into our discussion at our rules meeting. So. All right. So, are we done talking about flats and clips? Anybody else got anything on that? It's an interesting debate, and again, I think once the UCI says what their intention is for 2019 and beyond, and they're going to come down and make rules based on UCI tracks shouldn't be like this anymore, like. UCI kind of banned the whole crossover thing. And so they adjust their rules from time to time. And then the rest of the world, kind of follows suits, whether it's, it's rules about equipment or whatever, it certainly impacts us. Okay, so I had talked about this concept of local experts a little bit before. I alluded to it. And so I'm going to try to simplify this as much as possible. Before I even thought of bringing this to a webinar for everybody to chew on, we contacted a bunch of longtime TOs, a handful of them, get their thoughts on it. Most of them liked it. At the last webinar that I did, most of the people logged in liked this concept, but buckle up, it could get confusing, but just stay with me and I'll try to make it simple. All right, so at the local level, the current problem, as we've already talked about, the sandbaggers, right? So we know, let's go back to that slide because I'm trying to remember exactly what is on each of these slides. So we know that you've got riders that get up to their 18, 19 wins, and then they're done racing locally. Or they're done racing locally on their 20-inch bike, they're only pulling out the cruiser. Or they don't have a cruiser, so they're only coming out and practicing. Or they get stuck in a total points moto and they race 2 rounds and win 2 rounds and then no-show and get their 4 points and go home with their overall second. The point is, this idea, to me, my opinion, is that this concept of you're a local expert, but maybe you're not necessarily ready for expert at the national level or Gold Cup level is not a new thing. It's already there. It's just being kind of manipulated by controlling wins and what bikes they get them on, or winning in the open class, but pulling a second in the regular class. I mean, it's done right now, but it's just kind of done under different circumstances. So riders who were close to expert racing quit racing locally and practice only or race only cruiser, which others perceive as sanctioned sandbagging. It's the legal way to sandbag, right? Is what people will say. As a result, the true intermediate rider with a handful of wins, they just turned intermediate recently, is essentially racing against expert level riders who have simply sandbagged or manipulated the rules to stay in intermediate to be competitive at the higher level events. And I say sandbag, the rule book defines sandbagging as leading a race, intentionally trying to lose it, grabbing your brakes, whatever. I think that most people would have a broader view of it as, you know, if you quit racing when you got 18, 19 wins and only race your cruiser, it is sanctioned sandbagging. So I'm using the term loosely and differently than the rulebook defines it. And because these riders cut off the flow of riders who turn expert, many expert riders choose not to race locally because they don't like the classes, right? So you've got these intermediates who are good enough to compete at expert at the local track and could make some pretty good local expert classes, but because they're staying in intermediate because they want to go win that 7-foot tall trophy at the Grands, now the expert class isn't making it at the local level. And so the experts are like, well, I don't want to race then either. So we've talked about the problem. We know the analysis, the solution. So this is a solution that was kind of proposed actually a couple years ago by a track operator in San Diego, Vince McCurdy. And Vince runs a couple of tracks down there, and he's been a track operator essentially since I started at ABA in 1990. I mean, it's a little bit after 1990, but not by much. I mean, he's been doing it, 26, 27 years if I've worked there 28. So currently, riders move from intermediate to expert after 20 wins, and it doesn't really matter what type of race, right? 20 wins in the intermediate class, and boom, you're expert. And you're expert at any race. Riders can also move from intermediate to expert after 5 national or title wins. The proposed solution, Vince's proposed solution is this. Riders move from intermediate to be classified as a local expert after 20 wins any type of race. Same as now. Riders move from a local expert to expert after 10 series, national, or title wins. Now, what does local expert versus expert mean? Well, local expert means that you race expert at any race that is not a series level race. What do I mean by series level race? State championship or provincial championship series, the Gold Cup series, the national series. So basically, if you go out to a local single point race and you're a local expert, you race expert. If you go out to an earned double, you race expert. If you go to a state race, you race intermediate until you get 10 wins at that series, national, or title level. And of course, the same rule as right here would apply too. Riders could move from local expert to expert after 5 national or title wins. 5 national or title wins in the intermediate class at those races would move you to an expert, because you've shown that you're now dominating. You're now at the top level in intermediate at the higher level races. So now you're ready for expert at those higher level races. So again, it sounds like a radical idea. I would argue that this concept of local expert is kind of already here. So got some comments coming in. Sounds awesome. What a great idea. This is awesome. Will those riders be backdated? No, they won't. But here's the beauty of this. I think the beauty of this is right now when we think about the reclassification process, we get riders who most of the time they want to reclassify because they're doing all right locally. And let's face it, whether you're intermediate or expert at many local tracks, you might end up racing the same kids. If you're a 13I or a 13X, you might end up in the same class. So it doesn't really affect them locally. They want to reclassify because they're not doing well at this higher level of racing. They're not doing well at the nationals. And of course, we then have this tough thing where we look at it and we're like, well, yeah, they're not making expert mains, but that expert class had 28 riders, so 20 of them didn't make the expert main that day. I'm not going to reclassify the other 20. So then we look at how they do locally. They're doing okay locally. And so I think that if we went with this idea, I think that we could get a lot looser with moving people that aren't competitive at the series or national level back to a local expert but series intermediate to keep them around, and not necessarily putting them back in intermediate. When we put them back in intermediate, even when we do, we tell them, well, in 5 more wins, you're going to move back up. And what do they do then? Just like the intermediates the first time who get close, they start picking and choosing what races they're racing at. I only want to win at the state race or the state final or Gold Cups because I want to make sure, I'm winning a real class, right? And again, I think we could get a lot loose. While we won't automatically go back and move everybody back who didn't meet this criteria, if somebody wanted to say, hey, please look at my race history, I'd like to reclassify my kid, I think you could get a lot more liberal on who you move back, because you've got 2 options now. You can say, well, I'm going to move you back to a local expert but series intermediate, or you could move them back to an intermediate at the local level, intermediate at the series level. So, okay. So let me move back. I didn't know if I had another slide on that. Again, it's been a busy day. So clips versus flats needs to be ditched, and this idea needs 100% attention. Man, it's funny when Vince came to the office, and he came to the office twice. He came to the office, I believe, a year ago, presented the idea. I happened to be out of town. He presented it. B.A. Anderson sat in there. I know Shannon Gillette sat in on it, some other people. And then he came back, and I got to hear it. And, it certainly intrigued me once I was able to wrap my head around it. And there was kind of a concern where, some of the staff is like, well, it sounds intriguing. It'd be interesting to see what the tracks think. So, of course, again, before I ever thought of putting it onto a webinar for everybody to kind of see, um, I called some of the longtime track operators. And again, when I've got 20, 25-year track operators on the phone and they're 15-year track operators and they're going, man, that sounds like a really good idea. Well, now it's really got my attention. So now the thing is, well, can we get this? If we decided that we absolutely wanted to do this, could we get this programmed by 2019? So I think the next thing is just going to be, if you're hearing this idea, whether you're watching this webinar on a replay or whatever, and you're behind it, man, get me emails, whatever you can, so I can go into the rules meeting armed and say, you know what? The vast majority of the tracks feel like this would really help their program. And look, one of the things that I've said all along since I heard this idea, said it in the last webinar, is I believe that this causes a bunch of other outcomes that are good outcomes. I think that by moving some of these kids who we know are ready for expert at the local level, but they're just not ready at the national level, when you move them to local expert, I think that now you get better expert classes at local races. So you might get some of the experts who aren't racing to come back out. I think that's an unintended benefit. I think that the other thing that you get is, I think you get some of these intermediate riders who are hanging out at 18, 19 wins because they want to go to the national and win that big trophy. You let them move up to expert at the local level where they're earning 100 points for every single point race they do. I think that maybe you get them excited about the race for district number 1. They still get to compete at the national level in a class that they're competitive in, intermediate, until they've won those series or national level races and move up into the expert class at those types of events. But while they're a local expert but series intermediate, I think that you might get some of those really chasing a district number. And look, I mean, trying to drive up numbers at single point races, that's always my ultimate goal. Yeah, I want your state races to be huge. I want your Gold Cups to be huge. I want earned doubles. I want all that. But if what races anyways, let me finish that thought and I'll get to that, Renee. I think if we can get those riders, racing locally and chasing after that district, that just benefits the tracks. If your local program is thriving, if you're running a local single point race and you're doing 60, 70, 80, 100 or more riders per race, your track is just, is kicking butt. What races are included in series races? What races are included in series? So basically state championship, Gold Cup, national. So all of those races have the word series in them. Now, I'll say this. The last webinar I did, one of the comments, and it wasn't a bad thought at all, was, hey, you know what? I'm in, but you lost me at the state series. At the state series, if they're a local expert, they're an expert in the local state series. You want to keep them in at the Gold Cup series, even for Gold Cup qualifiers, and certainly your Gold Cup final, by saying that's a bigger level event. I'm more on board with that than saying you can be an intermediate in the state series but a local expert, because the state series is kind of an extension of that local series. And it was a good point. So it's a twist on what Vince's idea was, but I don't think that's thinking, I think that's really kind of thinking about it. So I certainly wanted to throw that out there because I thought that was a great comment, great thought from the last webinar. The last sentence, shouldn't that say, well, yeah, I mean, it could say, it says the last sentence on the current side, shouldn't that say intermediate to expert? Well, again, they're not intermediate at the local level. So anytime you see the term local expert, just know that if you're a local expert, it means you're not an expert, which means you're a you're a series level intermediate. You're allowed to race intermediate at the higher level races, but you're a local expert. So if you see, that's why I kept kind of putting local expert in parentheses. So I was trying to just get that point across that way, Amanda. But yeah. One says 10 and one says 5. Yeah, one says 10 because we're talking the 10 would what this line includes that this one doesn't is I wanted to highlight it, and of course I can't highlight it, is the 10 series as opposed to 5 national or title wins. These would include state championship races and Gold Cup qualifiers. That's the difference between that line of 10 and 5. So if you win any combination of 10 state, Gold Cup qualifier, Gold Cup final, national, well, there you go. Or if you win 5 national or title wins, ROC, Gold Cup final, you would move up, which is the current rule. All right, so that's that kind of different idea, kind of wild idea. And but I think it's a very interesting idea. Yeah, and that's, yeah, Chris, that's the biggest point in all this. And his comment was, when and if this rule takes effect, it will essentially eliminate sandbagging on all levels. It kind of does, because, you know, that's not to say that there's not people sandbagging to try to stay a novice. Look, nothing changes going novice to intermediate. You go novice to intermediate, it's the same as it is now. This is only a change for intermediate to expert, and changing it to intermediate to local expert. And again, you might be an intermediate that you don't ever get your 20 wins. From the time you turn novice, the first way you move out of intermediate is you win 5 nationals. Well, you're never a local expert then. You went right from intermediate to expert at both the local level and the series level. That could happen. I don't think it will, but it certainly could. But yeah, would this essentially eliminate sandbagging? Yeah, for the most part, I think this would. I really, really do. All right. Well, now let me take a peek at who's on here. And of course, I told Donnie that I'm going to get to. I told Donnie that I'm going to get to the league stuff about 6:30. He thought was what time we hit it last time, and we're getting there early. We're there at 6 o'clock. So that's okay. If he hops in here, I'm going to make sure I pull my attendees window out and try to take a peek at it. Where'd it go? Oh, no, that's a problem. So I certainly want his input if he jumps in here. Let me try to find my attendee window so I can. Well, that's wild. I tried to pop that out. Well, I'll tell you what, Donnie, if you jump on, let me know via the questions or something, and we'll try to figure out how to unmute your thing. Good question, Kristen. So I hadn't heard that, actually. I mean, I certainly heard a lot of. Oh, there's my attendee list. It popped over to the other screen. All right. I certainly heard a lot when we did the 17 to 20 expert class. You know, that there was a lot of, oh my goodness, there's such a huge advantage if you're 20 years old versus 17, and you know, da 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 da. And again, I mean, for me, I looked at the fact that we've had 17 to 20 cruisers since I started at the ABA in May of 1990, and nobody ever said boo about 17 to 20 cruiser being unfair for the 17-year-olds. So, I stand by that. It is what it is. I mean, everybody knew when they moved from 16 cruiser, they're going to keep racing cruiser. It's 17 to 20. No, but there were certainly enough people that were unhappy about the 17 to 20 expert class when it got announced that, I would certainly expect, and I would say that if you feel like, hey, that class is, certainly email and let us know. But no, I mean, it's not like internally that's been a, hey, we've got to change this back conversation. And again, I always say all these things about, when I jump on these webinars and I'm on behalf of the sanction, I'll always be the first to say, my opinions are my opinions, and they're not always, the same as what the majority of people at USA BMX may think. And so I may say, hey, this is how I feel about this. And you think, hey, that's never going to see the light of day. And then it does, because, and again, a good example of that was very early on, Renee talking about, hey, I think it'd be great if you took nationals down to no district points. And I said, hey, I wanted to make them worth single district points to try to put the emphasis back on supporting the local track if you really want to chase that district number. I just didn't get the votes behind to get it done. So it happens that we've got, we're a tight knit office, but we're an office full of different opinions and everything, and that's a great thing. Question and general comment from my team: to require gloves as hands are the first to go down. Personally, we recommend and a full face and have them to borrow. Yeah. Yeah, gloves, making them required, and they are required at UCI events, by the way. That's required equipment at, when I go and officiate as a UCI commissaire at some of these UCI events, that's you've got to have your gloves. And so, yeah, I mean, that's certainly something we could talk about. So many times it's just like with the helmets, we certainly recommend a full face helmet, but we always try to think too about, barrier to entry. The more equipment you say you got to have before you get into the sport, the more you may get people kind of going, man, that's a lot, And I'll give you a good example. While I was trying to have my son Porter, I took my dirt car and put it on jack stands for nearly 7 years. It sat on jack stands. And of course, my son's 5 now. And so, I back got the car going again. And in that time, like the amount of required equipment that I need to have, now I need to have a $200 transponder and a subscription to that transponder company in order to get scored, because they're not scoring by hand anymore. I've got to have about $125 receiver, a one-way communication between the track and myself, so they can help get the lineups. I race dirt circle track cars. Gloves are mandatory now at some of the tracks I go to. Arm restraints are mandatory now at a couple of the tracks that I race at, because a guy flipped his car and his arm came out the window, roll cage landed on it, and there's an arm injury. So those things just weren't around, and they are around now. Some of those are track convenience things, some are safety things, but all of it is just more money up front for the guy trying to get into that hobby class, right? So we always think about that too. And, certainly, man, I hate seeing people crash without gloves on, especially on asphalt. And let's face it, some of the tracks now, I've seen tracks that, have that beautiful crushed stone. Stouffville BMX comes to mind, and they've got just an absolute rock hard, because they've put this amazing glue compound on it, and yet they've got that kind of crushed stone. Falling on that's the same as falling on asphalt. I mean, it's gonna skin you up, and having gloves on would just make perfect sense. But Of course, there's difficulty. Okay, talking about 17 to 20. Yeah, and one of the things with the 17 to 20, yeah, it is a large group at nationals. And that, you know, we love when, and look, I mean, if a 10-year-old kid wins the title, a 10-year-old kid wins the title. In Canada last year, I think I had two 7-year-olds win national titles up there, and that's great. But I always love when a kid has raced since they were 5. They get up into those older expert classes where they know they've got the rider count now to get the best shot at that title, and they win it. The tough thing, I think, when you're a little kid and you win that title is that you've hit the pinnacle. Until you turn pro, you've hit the pinnacle of the sport. And so the best you can hope to do is to repeat it. And sometimes you're going to transition through expert age groups where you're simply not going to have the rider count to put that together. So, sometimes to have the rules where, you're giving them the best opportunity to win that title. And look, I said this when we announced the 17 to 20 expert class. I said, everybody said the same thing about 17 to 20 as when we took 17 and 18, which were individual ages, and made it 17/18, 17-18 expert, right? It went from 17X and 18X to 17-18. They said the same thing. They said the same thing when we took 15 girls and 16 girls to 15-16 girls. We did both of those changes in the same year, and that year, the national number 1 riders came out of those classes. And again, the counter argument to that, which was a point very well made by a track operator from Florida, is, well, is the sanction making rules, for the select few that have a shot at the national title? Well, no, not necessarily, but we're trying to make classes that are exciting for people to race in, and it's a shock the first year that it happens, and then it just becomes the norm. And again, I think that the 17 to 20 cruiser class being around for 28 years and nobody saying anything about it, and us launching a 17 to 20 expert class and all of a sudden the sky is falling, is a good example of the fact that people get used to it. So anyways, all right, good stuff on the rules, and we're inching closer to Donnie's 6:30 time that he was going to call in. Anything else on rules before I flip on over to league real quick? And again, guys, whether you comment on here, shoot me an email. Man, I love to get feedback. I love to take that feedback into the rules meeting to show this is what our tracks want. Our tracks are behind this. And particularly with this particular change with this local experts, if you all think it's a good idea, I need to know, and I need to know very quickly, because I am going to have one heck of a time convincing the powers that be above me that this is good and that our programmer can get this done and ready to go by 2019 so we can roll this out with no hiccups. And what I would hate is that everybody thinks this is a great thing, and it doesn't get voted in because not enough people said, I think this would be revolutionary for our sport. Because if you do feel that, I need to know that, or B, that we don't get that answer quick enough so that I can really get behind or get on the programmer about, okay, Jeff, I need you to give me an honest assessment that with everything else on your plate and everything else that we're trying to do, finalize the Torf Wizard and importing the stuff in, that you can get this done for the 2019 season. So that's kind of my cross to bear in all of this, being kind of the IT overseer. Curtin certainly handles all of the IT needs of the department, but they just kind of have me because of all the background that I had going to school for programming, overseeing it. So among other tasks. All right. BMX Racing League. Again, I'll talk about what I know with this. And let me see if I had a file, and now it might be difficult for me to find it. Let's see. Well, I'm going to just show you some of these slides and talk about some of these programs. This is Katy BMX, Katy, Texas, right outside of Houston, and their league program. Again, if you haven't found out about league, this is changing programs left and right. And it seems, and I love putting these pictures up. So there is Katy BMX. There is Yukon BMX and the recently married coach Adam going through with all of the riders there. So it seems like every month we're adding more and more tracks to this. And they're finding tremendous success. I mean, the conversion rates are great. We've got League version 2.0. There's Omaha BMX, and just look at the sea of blue shirts. So you've got, of course, the parent coaches in the back, and then all of the riders. Napa BMX. So of course, this is Donnie's track, and again, this is probably maybe first day, obviously first day of league, because I see them getting their blue shirts, but just to see if kids kind of lined up to get signed up, to get their number plates, to get their shirts. And so I had this in a previous webinar, but last webinar somebody was like, well, that's all well and good, but how many of those riders that are going through league are converting to full members? And those will vary from track to track, but this was an amazing case study, and I just loved that I was able to talk to the track and find out exactly what they did to hit the numbers that they hit. And so let's take a look, and if you've seen this before, it's worth seeing again. Hampton BMX, Hampton, Virginia, their first league that they did, 92 riders signed up for the league open house. 92 riders came out for the league open house. They had 42 participants that signed up in the first league. So that's not bad. You put 90 or so kids out on the track for an open house, a free day, and 42 of them bought into, essentially at the time might have been 129. I think it's 149 now. But that's a big financial commitment to sign up for that then 5-week program. And of course, now it's a 6-week program at $149 price point. After the league was done, 21 of those 42 riders converted to new full memberships, and 2 of the parents also converted. So there were 23 new full memberships out of that league. So how'd they do that? Well, I certainly asked the question. 5-race punch card was the answer. They wanted to incentivize those riders. Of course, anybody who signs up for league, if they convert from a league rider to a full member, they're converting for $30. So they're basically getting that full membership for half off. And that's true while the league is going on or after the league. You could have a rider that's in your league, and 4 months after their league was done, they decide, you know what? I kind of had fun 4 months ago doing that BMX thing. They could log on to our website, and this functionality is here right now. It was part of my meeting with the web developers that this functionality is tested and is working. If they look up their name on the website and it sees that they're a league membership, it knows to only charge them $30 to convert that to a full membership. So, but they incentivize the kids spending that $30 this way, a 5-race punch card. So the single point entry fee for that track was $11. So basically they offered a $55 value for $30. It ensures that those riders will likely do the 5 races, which maximizes their track points, right? There were a lot of tracks that were doing this. Hey, if you get your 5 races in, we're going to give you this plaque, and each race you get a sticker on the plaque. I saw that from Hornets Nest BMX. I saw that from Sarasota BMX. And there's probably more tracks doing that now. This was their kind of way to do that via a punch card that they prepaid. So again, that's kind of what the punch card looked like. So certainly appreciate the Hampton folks sending that over to us. So again, BMX Racing League version 2.0, it is $149 price point. It expanded to a 6th week with no racing on the first league night. And what that did was that allowed the tracks to be able to take signups the first night. So before that, we were trying to put these kids into mock races and group them for racing on that first night. But now everything is basically set up for you. And so when a track decides they're going to do the league, all of the signups are handled online via that BMX Racing League website. So the parent buys the membership, they sign the waiver online. The track doesn't have to do a thing. And so before you're and even on your first league night, you can take more signups. They can get signed up, and by your second league night, which is going to be the first night that you put them in these mock races, Bill Curtin will have gotten you an updated rider update that makes your track a league eligible track and gives you basically a pre-signed file for you to pull in and automatically sign up all these league riders into their classes. So, I mean, you're not even looking these riders up by name or serial number to put them into these mock races. It just gets done for you automatically. So, we really took something, and I was laughing when Donnie was on the call last week about how difficult it must have been as him and Mike Carruth got this thing off the ground in just all of the stuff that is kind of an automated process now, as we've put the power of the USA BMX Foundation and that staff behind it. And of course, they just kind of button down the processes and procedures and really streamline that. Mike DeVarney and Sandra did an amazing job kind of streamlining everything. And now, and for some of you who may not know this, now the league is really being handled by Tyson Abaroa, who, of course, Tyson was a track director. He's been in the membership department for years. Wife Mandy's working in the accounting department and also handling some special projects. So Tyson now is handling league, and pretty much just handling league. And of course, he's got Donnie. So him and Donnie are kind of a two-man team, double teaming this thing. And of course, Bill Curtin is certainly helping from the IT perspective in terms of getting everything out to the tracks and stuff. So expanding to a 6 weeks allows for a last minute sign up through the first night of league and then a hard cutoff. Then you can't add any more riders to it. As I mentioned, riders can upgrade from a league to a full at any time for $30. And this should have been updated. We are not working on the website functionality. They told me today that it is working, tested, and is working great. And we switched to a system-generated 3-digit bike numbers. No need to change plates once they convert to an NFM. From a track point perspective, we said anybody that signs up for a league, whether they become a full member or not, starting with league version 2.0, which kicked off in April, that league rider is worth 5 track points to you. If they convert to a new full member, you get an additional 5 track points. So now they've given you 10 points. And of course, you get 10 track points for each race of the first 5 single point races at your track. So now these league members that are coming in through league are worth a maximum of 60 track points, whereas a rider who comes in off the street, buys a brand new full membership for $60 and just tries to go at it on his own, as has always been done, caps out at 55 track points, even if he does those 5 single point races. So again, 60 possible points for riders coming through the league. So again, trying to incentivize people to, hey, this is the best way to onboard these riders into the system. For a lot of people, if your dad didn't race BMX, and I talked to one of those dads, I forget where he was from. I don't know if he was from Florida, but he was one of those guys that was like, I didn't race BMX, and so I'm kind of learning all of this as I go. And that's the tough thing, right? Is because if you don't have a great coaching program set up at your track, these kids, as they sign up, you post motos and they're just kind of left to their own devices. And again, I mean, one of the things, let me go back. One of the things that Donnie and I were talking about last week was just this whole, why might a track choose not to do a league? And if you follow anything on BMX Racing League on social media, Donnie is constantly posting, of the 65 riders that were out tonight, 48 of them have come out of league. And I mean, and it may even be more lopsided than that, but it seems like every week he's got a post. And, I know he talked about the fact that, now so many of the volunteers that are volunteering at Napa BMX, and that's true at nearly every track that has run a league, is these parents coming in are told right from the beginning that, look, we are a volunteer organization. They're just being brought in, right? They're not being brought in, like a lot of parents now look at going to the BMX track like going to a restaurant. I would never think when I go sit down at a restaurant that I'm expected to take my plates into the kitchen and wash them or whatever, right? Like I don't need to help. I'm paying you money for a service, right? And these parents, as they come in through league, like they're just being kind of taught, hey, our program survives off of volunteers, and these parents want to volunteer. And nearly every track that has hosted a league will tell you, my volunteer base is expanding because of having these leagues. So, Donnie, I said, Donnie, what would you say? Would you tell a track that said, I'd love to do league, I just don't have the staff, to be out there an extra night or 2 nights a week while I try to get this first league going. I mean, that's just, yes, you may have to, kind of suck it up and really draw upon your volunteers for that first league. But after that, you're going to have parents that want to volunteer, that want to help and to be a part of the program. And it's a big reason to get involved with league. So, well, for whatever reason, either Donnie and I were wrong about what time we kind of switched to getting into these league slides, or we just got done a little quicker than last time. There weren't as many rule debates. But for whatever reason, we're there. Donnie doesn't look like made it on. That's kind of all I had. If there's any, somebody asking Canadian price, I believe, and I need to check BMXRacingLeague.com. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick and see the Canadian price. I want to double check it, but I want to say it's either 150. I think it's 159 or 169. Let me see if the BMX Racing League website says what that Canadian price is. And if not, Amanda, shoot me an email and I will find that out for you. I apologize. I had it and just not getting any younger these days. Let's see. So does it say pricing? You know what? I think I know where I can try to find that. I think I know where I can try to find that answer. Let me look real quick here. I want to say it's 159, but I want to be sure. Well, this isn't loading as quickly as I thought it would. Yeah, I don't see it. Well, shoot me an email. I'll look that up for you, or actually, even better, shoot an email to Tyson, Tyson at usabmx.com, or Donnie, Donny at bmxracingleague.com. I bet both of those gentlemen would know that answer right off the top of their head. All right. Anybody else have any other questions, comments, concerns? All right. Well, I am going to post this as I always do. up on the TO dashboard. I should get this posted tonight. So if anybody asks, hey, is this ready to go? Oh, hold on, a couple more questions. So yeah, Ben. So basically asking, is it okay now for league members to run their league plate and number in open racing? Well, if you got into league on league version 2.0, the serial number that they got by signing up for league, their league number, if their league number is the last three digits of that serial number that they got, then the answer to that is yes. Were there any debates from last week worth mentioning tonight? I thought I mentioned them all. But again, Carol, the brain's getting old, and I've been doing so much travel. I mean, got back from Guatemala on Monday. I leave for Washington tomorrow, back on Monday, and then head back out on Wednesday. So it's just like sometimes when that happens, I literally, if I switch to my camera view right now, you would see my suitcase sitting on the floor outside of my laundry room because the clothes go out of it into the washer, into the dryer, and back into the suitcase. And sometimes you just get in those ruts, and man, it's tough. Good question here, and I don't know the exact answer. What's a minimum number of riders needed to run a league? I know that we've had them where they've had in the 20s. I don't know that I've seen a league with too many less than that. I mean, I don't think there would be a minimum, though. Again, great question for Tyson and Donnie. I mean, look, if you get 12 brand new riders that sign up for league, and you go, hey, you know what, 12, if I can turn 6 of those 12 riders in, that's worth me being out there one more night for, a week for 5-6 weeks. Hey, I mean, yeah, who cares? Side number plates required soon or not? Yeah, I mean, we're certainly telling people that they're required at nationals. And look, here's a great, if you're still on, for those of you still on, bonus material for those that stayed late. But one of the things that I've said all along with side plates is, man, what are you going to do if you say side plates are required and you get a guy who doesn't have them? Let's be honest. They're a convenience for announcers. The stagers have said, Brad, it is amazing to be able to stage kids who have side plates because I don't need to go look at the front of their bike. Sometimes they can be, down for me where I don't have an angle to see the front of their bike. I look at that side plate and I know who they are because of who they are on the motorship, for the person working the back of the hill, right? So it's a convenience thing. Certainly, if we go to a video review, having that side plate to identify those riders from that side angle, that's awesome. I mean, I scored that whole world championships at Rock Hill using basically that $18,000 camera, and it was looking at side plates. So they're amazing. So, I mean, for me, what do you do when the novice doesn't have a side plate? I mean, for me, I wanted that rule amended, and we'll see if we amend it in the rule book for next year to basically read like this. If you go to a national, and this is what my rule would be, is if you went to a national and you did not have a side plate on, you weren't allowed to come up and request to see a video of your race. If you want to see a finish line video because you had a close call and you want to look at the video, got to have a side plate. Don't have a side plate? Nope, no problem. Just can't look at the video. And that way, you're not telling a kid who doesn't have a side plate on when he comes through staging, hey, you can't get in the gate or whatever. And, it's just kind of a preference thing. And so that was kind of my idea as we got into close to July and not everybody had a side plate. And, well, what are we going to do if they don't have it? I said, well, why don't you just do this? And that way, it's required if you want to see a video, but it's not mandatory if not, so we'll see if that happens, though. Again, I come up with ideas all the time that don't see the light of day. Canadian Grands, yeah. So we got Washington for the Gold Cup final this weekend, and then and that's going to be exciting. Got that cool Washington Oregon thing that they're doing. They basically, for those of you who don't know this was really cool. Uh, if you finished with a state 1 through 4 in Washington or Oregon, they wanted to put all those riders in a gate of 8 and basically have a shootout to determine which state was better, right? The riders, if you're from Washington, you get a plate with a W on it. If you're from Oregon, you get a plate with an O on it. It was put together by the aforementioned Steve Clark, and we're going to run that Saturday night up at Columbia Basin, which is super, super cool. I'm excited about that. Chris Loon and I built that race. So see you in the Big Red Barn. Yep. Love it for announcing the side plates. Yeah, absolutely. 2 questions. When will the Gold Cup applications come out for 2019? As soon as John David gives me the rest of the schedule, man. Somebody was asking me that question today when I was on the phone, and I'm like, I really want to know the remainder of the schedule and be able to get it out to you guys before I go to the Big Red Barn in Chilliwack for the Canadian Grands, which is not this weekend, but next weekend, because I usually sit down with all those BC track operators and we talk about their BMX Canada series. So I'm hoping by next week. I just don't know. I mean, it doesn't do me any good to send the Gold Cup applications out and open up that online application process if I don't have an entire 2019 schedule. That's always the conundrum, Renee. Are we ever going to have another TO Summit? Man, they asked me, my track directors, because I have weekly meetings with all of my regional track directors, and they asked me that. I didn't have my bosses on the phone at the time, and I said, I don't. Yes, I think the answer to that is yes. The question is when, and is it going to happen for 2019? I've got to ask John David and or BA that question. My feelings would be no, because to me, if we were going to host one in 2019, I needed to be telling you guys this in May or June of this year and open up, for you guys to order those window decals to sell them at your local track all summer long to raise the funds to get there in the spring of 2019. And that didn't happen. So if they suddenly came to me and said, hey, we're going to do a summit for 2019, I'm going to be a little upset that I didn't get more of a heads up to give you guys a heads up to try to get you the tools to raise money via different things that we can do to get there. So I know the answer is yes. We love doing those summits. We think they're great. It's just, when is it going to happen? All right, gang. I think I got to the. Yeah, I'm not saying are we ever going to have. Yeah, it is. It is, and they're a ton of fun. They are a ton of fun. You know what? On a lighter note, is the TO Grands race getting as much excitement as it is around Facebook? It is the rage of Facebook. If it's not talking about clipless pedal, the question is, should we allow track operators to clip in? I think that needs to be the big debate next week on Facebook. But you know what? I'll be honest, Ben. We've had so many of us coming and going because of this horrendous stretch of races with all the Gold Cups and double races happening. And then you only had Missouri happening this weekend, but I was in Guatemala. We honestly haven't had time to sit down and to talk about it and to go, okay, this is a real thing. TOs really want to do this. Let's figure out how we're going to do this, and so on and so forth. So I don't know that we'll have that discussion next week. I get back on Monday. I'm in the office Tuesday and part of the day on Wednesday, and then I take off again. But after I get done with the Canadian Grands, I think, in the office until our Grands. So for sure, I will get that brought up to everybody and figure that out. But yeah, man, that got a lot of play, and I kept getting tagged in more posts than I could shake a stick at. All right, guys. Well, you guys have a great weekend, and I'll get this posted soon. Thanks, everyone.